Welcome to today's webinar on the Connecting Europe Facility Telecom call for cybersecurity. My name is Owen Byrne, the Cluster Manager for Cyber Ireland, which is Ireland's national cybersecurity cluster organisation. It's backed by IDA Ireland and Enterprise Ireland and based at Cork Institute of Technology. So the cluster brings together industry, academia, government with over 180 members at present to represent the needs of the cybersecurity sector in Ireland, to address key challenges that have been identified by industry, and our aim is to support the development of Ireland as a leading global location for cybersecurity. Now, the final CEF Telecom call opened on the 30th of June this year and has 2.5 million available for projects up to 3 years in duration, with a very attractive 75% EU co-funding for projects. Funding is available for government bodies and industry, notably operators of essential services under the NIS directive, for internal capacity building for cybersecurity, information sharing and analysis centres, and stakeholders involved in cybersecurity certification or conformity assessment bodies. The call deadline is fast approaching. It's the 5th of November. And interestingly, the European Commission is encouraging increased participation in the CEF call from Ireland this year. So, to raise awareness of the call and potential funding for organisations in Ireland, we organised this information webinar in collaboration with the National Cybersecurity Centre to provide an overview of the call with speakers from the NCSC, successful applicants from the previous CEF call from 2019, and the CEF Application Evaluator. So over to our speakers this morning. We have James Caffrey, who's a staff engineer in the Cybersecurity Policy Division at the Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment, with responsibility for implementing the National Cybersecurity Strategy. Previously, James worked in Europe as a policy officer for the DG Connect, and so he has a wealth of knowledge on the EU cybersecurity landscape and CEF Telecom call from previous years. James is going to provide us with an overview of the CEF call, the benefits in participating, example projects from previous calls, advice on submitting your proposal, and also some future opportunities with the new Digital Euro programme, which is coming out in 2021, where there'll be over 2 billion in funding for cybersecurity potentially. After James, we're going to hear from Sean O'Sullivan, the Operations Technology Lead at Gas Networks Ireland, who are one of only 2 successful projects chosen from Ireland under CEF funding in 2019. Sean is going to offer some real practical insights from his experience in applying to the call, what they have learned from the process, and what they wish they knew before applying. And then finally, we have Brian Honan, CEO of BH Consulting, who is a previous CEF evaluator. From Brian's experience of evaluating applications, he'll be able to provide advice on proposal writing, what do evaluators like to see, and importantly, what they don't like to see also. We're going to finish up then and close with about 10 minutes for question and answers. So just a bit of housekeeping before we kick off. If you can keep your video off and your microphone muted during all the presentations to avoid any disruptions. When we come to the questions and answers section, please feel free to turn on your video and your microphone if you'd like to ask a question. Also, in the meantime, if you have a burning question, please feel free to use the chat function during the presentation and just note which of the speakers the question is for, and we'll come back to it at the end. And just a note that this meeting is being recorded and we'll be disseminating out the recording along with the slides afterwards. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to James Caffrey.
Okay. Thanks very much, Owen. Good morning all. Just maybe a brief introduction about myself. I'm working in the Department Comms, Climate Action and Environment, and also with the NCSC on cyber. I have previously worked in the Commission in regard to the CEF funding programme for cybersecurity, and I'm currently working on the National Cybersecurity Strategy implementation. So apologies on behalf of Richard Brown, who heads up cyber in the department and the NCSC. He was unable to join this morning for the introduction. So what are we talking about in terms of Connecting Europe facility? Well, there have been annual calls for proposals since 2016, amounting to approximately 40 million euro on cybersecurity. And of course, there are approximately 57 proposals between 2016 and 2018, with funds being granted to about over 22 member states. Last year, we were successful in 2019, and there were 2 proposals from Ireland which are now going through the final stages, perhaps with contracts now being awarded for cybersecurity, and you'll hear from one of them shortly after myself. So this is the last year. 2020 is the last year for funding under the CEF for cybersecurity. We're making a special effort to promote this EU call for funding with a view to increasing participation from Ireland, and also in the context of subsequent funding through the new Digital Europe programme, which will be far greater than what has been available through CEF. So the purpose of this particular webinar is to focus specifically on industry, particular operators of essential services who need to, I suppose, to a certain degree comply with certain requirements under the NIS directive, and the CEF cybersecurity provides the opportunity for funding to support capabilities development. So what are we looking at in terms of the call itself? It's 10.5 million, 75% co-funding, projects up to 3 years. That means in effect that projects which will start from about 2021 to 2024, just over half the funding can be drawn down just after the start of the projects, and effectively the level of funding is at 75%. There is no upper limit on what you can apply for. So in the past, all cybersecurity calls have been undersubscribed. So if, for example, you're looking at a proposal that's of the order of 1 million, you need to have an own resource of 250,000. Or indeed, if you're talking about 500,000, an own resource of 125,000. You'll also need to bear in mind that there's significant effort required in putting the proposal together. So that also will perhaps act as a de facto lower limit on the level of the size of your project that you would look at funding through the CEF. Another important message here is that approval from the department as a national ministry for Ireland is essential, but effectively this is more, it's a requirement under EU law. It's more a question of the proposal being submitted for vetting by the EU authorities. So it is, approval is separate to any kind of form of letter of support that you might need. It's largely a formality. So if you do require letters of support from the NCSC or from the department, you should look for them separately rather than through the approval process itself. The approval process is largely a formality, as I just want to emphasize. And of course, if you want evaluators to be aware of linkages between your proposal and the broader cybersecurity institutional arrangements, you will separately need those letters of support in due course. So what's the call in effect? The call is effectively, it's about supports for industry who is regulated under the NIS directive, that's operators of essential services. It's also for threat sharing in the context of what's known as ISACs. And it's also there for objectives 2 and 3, primarily for public bodies, but can also involve, private sector partners who are working in consortia with public bodies around basic cybersecurity operational preparedness, and also cooperation with other member states through objective 3. Lastly, objective 4, which is on cybersecurity certification under the EU Cybersecurity Act. That's for enhancing internal capabilities, which includes audits, protection profiles, if you look at the concept of common criteria, for example. It's also about cross-border exchanges in terms of best practice, staff exchanges, etc., site visits, and also evaluation. And under Objective 4, there are 3 categories. We're looking at funding national cybersecurity certification authorities. We're looking at the national accreditation body, which in Ireland would be INAB. And also, I suppose, a particular interest to industry would be conformity assessment bodies, etc., which can be public and private. So if we move on then in terms of the first objective, which I'm going to focus a little specific on, this is a particular extract taken from the actual Commission's own presentation that was delivered in July at the Information Day. So it's about internal capacity building within critical infrastructure operators who happen to be OES in Ireland, in essence. So that could be anything in terms of infrastructure, hardware, software. It can be soft measures, it could be training, it could be exercises, it could be audits, red teaming, blue teaming, cybersecurity challenges, whatever you wish to do. It can also be in the context of improving your situational awareness, in the context of threat sharing with information sharing and analysis centers. And there, of course, any entity, private or public, can be involved in establishing an ISAC, provided you actually have in the ISAC operators of essential services. And ideally, the idea here is that they need to be led, they need to be industry-led. In effect, of course, it can be other partners around the table. So who would those other partners be? Your critical infrastructure operators, you're dealing with suppliers, you're dealing with maybe expertise from consultancy expertise, you're also dealing with public bodies as well in terms of improving situational awareness, understanding the environment around you. There's also an opportunity then for public authorities, which in Ireland would be the National Cybersecurity Centre, or indeed the Central Bank of Ireland, which is a national competent authority, in terms of having kind of a system of ISACs engaging with industry to assist and reach out, and that's another option that would be on the table. So, of course, with provision of funding, there are also requirements that the Commission imposes, and in this context, the Commission has what they call a core service platform project for ISACs, which is the Empowering Consortium that's led by Dutch consultants Capgemini, involving TNO from the Netherlands, etc., that is involved separately with the Commission. There would be some requirement to interact with that consortium in terms of engaging at a European level. So again, that's just something to be aware of. In terms of the particular timeline for processing, this is laid out in the Commission's information. It's quite a lengthy timeline. Immediately after closing on the 5th of November, applications are checked for admissibility, etc. So that's an eligibility. That can also mean things can be referred back to member states, to government departments here, for example. So have you got approval from the government department? If you don't have it, your project won't go too far. But also making sure that you have applied for the right objective under the call, in essence. So have you filled in the relevant template? If you are an operator of essential service, there is a declaration that needs to be filled in. If you're an ISAC, there's a self-declaration. So ensuring that you have all the supporting documentation in place is critical. And an evaluation is quite a complex process involving external evaluation and an internal deliberation in the Commission itself. So it'll probably be next April by the time the Commission will actually make a call on this. And when it does make a decision, it will publish effectively a press release, and it will give more or less the name of the entity that will be receiving the money, or the coordinator of the consortium, the title of the proposal, and the amount of EU money that has been provided, in essence. So that has been the case this year. And of course, once that happens, negotiations, or rather the finalization of the contract, takes place based on a template grant agreement, where effectively the Commission will look at taking the commitments you made in your proposal and incorporating them into the contract. And of course, there will also be special conditions attached by the lead Director General, which will be Connect in the Commission itself, around policy-related matters around ISACs, for example, if you're thinking of OES, or indeed in this directive. So just to be conscious that they can be added as well by the Commission. So in terms of proposals, if you go to the Commission, if you go to the link at the end of this, you'll see, for example, this is typically the kind of information you'll get on the Commission's website. There's a kind of a proposal from Luxembourg involving an ISAC and internet peering. We have a proposal there from Bulgaria, which is about ISO 27000 compliance, quite basic. You'll see the amount of money that effectively that the overall proposal, then the coordinator, and the period of the project. And of course, we have a final one there from Sweden, which is about SIM infrastructure for a port. And again, that's just, so all that information is available online for you to look at, to give you an idea in terms of what is kind of taking place. I mentioned that Ireland was successful in 2019. Of course, they're not on the website yet. We have one from Irish Water, which involved 150,000 AI threat detection analysis and hunting platform. So that's one. And then we have Gas Networks Ireland, development of policies, procedures and training for GNI OT, and that's about 195,000 euros. So all that information is available in the press release section of the Commission. So again, also to mention that in 2019 there have been some successful proposals, consortia on terms of European cybersecurity challenges, got 1.2 million. So you can apply on your own, you can apply as a group within Ireland, or you can apply as part of a pan-European consortium. So there are various options available for you. So if your proposals are successful and you get your contract in place, the Commission will monitor the projects effectively. There will be ongoing communication with the Commission. I think it's quite critical here that, based on my experience, the Commission, even at kind of a policy level and Connect, will look very much at every single proposal that's been funded. There will be quarterly meetings with the agency, the Commission agency that deals with this, Innovation Networks Executive Agency, in terms of what's the status. Problems and issues do arise, and when they do arise, it could be something unforeseen, something you may have intended to go out to procure, you cannot procure, etc. Communication is essential. You need to tell the Commission if changes are needed, and there is flexibility to do changes in essence. There's even flexibility to suspend projects, and that has happened in essence, where there's and projects that are suspended can then be re-engaged at a later stage. So, and what would be the key benefits here, aside from the financial kind of, would be, of course, networking, depending on who you are and what sector you're in, for example. We already know the energy sector was already particularly well connected with peers at a European level through other EU regulations and other EU processes. But again, if you're thinking of future funding opportunities through the Digital Europe programme, then of course being already involved, there is already a natural advantage. You're familiar with the process, you already understand peers that are working in the area as well. Whether you do or wish to work with them, obviously will be up to yourselves. And you're also aware of EU policy developments and what the Commission looks for in terms of its proposals as well, in a much deeper way be the case. So, for example, there's a lot more that's happening in Brussels than just in this directive. So we have the EU Cybersecurity Act. There'll also be a funding body being established to deal with money in terms of competence centre and network. There's a lot of thinking around a joint cyber unit operation with member states. So there's, again, if you were to read the document, the material that's coming out from Brussels, some of this times just providing that information as part of the relevance element in the proposal is key. So again, here is effectively the Commission. You can go to the call page effectively, and you will get this information in real time. What's important here is the application. So what's key here is the call text. You look at the call text, that's your Bible, that's where you need to look at, and certainly the objectives and eligibility is what you need to read first. The Commission have their own application process known as TENTEC. And again, what I was mentioning here, confirmation letter from OES, you need to look at it, and ditto as well. So how would you look at preparing a proposal? I think you need to effectively, one approach here is you need to do maybe a kind of a summary business case, maybe to a 3-page synopsis of an outline. What is this? What's the scope of this? What will this be for? It's not just about, okay, there's an opportunity to get money. It has to be what is core to your business, what is core to your requirements as a public authority. Effectively, okay, do up a brief outline. You're going to need to get your senior management buy-in anyway in terms of putting a serious proposal together on this. And of course, once you have senior management buy-in, and that would need to happen pretty soon given the call it's going to submit on the 5th, is effectively you would need to have a small project team in place to deliver on this. You need someone familiar with EU call processes, someone who can write a proposal so that you have the right language in place. It's not sufficient just to reference the NIS directive. You need to understand what is the NIS directive, how is it applied, and other legislation in place and other processes and things that the Commission is dealing with. You also need to subject matter expert in terms of what it is that you're writing. So if you need someone from OPSEC, for example, if you are going to be writing in terms of, oh, I need a new IDS, I need to upgrade, I'm going to write some software in terms of IDS monitoring, etc., and I'm going to basically interact with open source alternatives out there. So having that in place, you need to know what you're writing as well. So you need to have the right level of detail in there that people who are going to evaluate this understand you know what you're talking about. So you need to have the right balance there. So you also have the proposer who knows how to process this, and of course project manager to make sure the administrative material. It would be well advised to have an external reviewers in place so that when your proposal is well drafted, that you have someone read over it in essence. So, okay, to give you instant feedback. Are there key gaps in place in essence? And of course, getting your letters of support in place, having your CVs, letter support from peers is important as well. Are you well known in other member states in Europe? So if you're a public body and you're already dealing, okay, more or less reaching out to your peers, looking for support for your proposal is critical. Because again, Brussels is looking at this, okay, it's not just about, does it locally work in Ireland? Do these guys, are they working on a European stage? Are they interacting with their peers in other member states? Is also a critical lever here as well. Just to be conscious that while the FAQ's website is available, if you want to ask questions from the Commission, your last date is going to be 15th of October. Again, at this stage, you would certainly need to be winding down in terms of having your proposal well drafted and aiming for completion in late October. Is going to be essential. You're going to need to get senior management buy-off on the detail. And of course, you need to be conscious as well that you need to be interacting with that Commission's website, 10Tech, well in advance of the closing date. I would advise you even submitting the proposal maybe a day early, in essence. Again, you don't want to run into problems with time on the day. I mean, literally there is a cutoff. It's like a tender. If you're late, you're late. Some key tips here as I kind of finish up would be to read the call text document carefully, look at the word criteria. So relevance, this is about the Commission likes to hear back about its policies, its proposals. If you're working in OPSEC, for example, you mightn't really appreciate that, and hence if you have a drafter, maybe from academia, and maybe someone's been through the process before, they will understand the importance of this section, because your reward criteria is based on 3 key elements. It's in other words, so how is this relevant to policies and developments in Brussels? And again, you see a lot of this material on the Commission's own website in terms of their information day. The proposal itself, have you got CVs of the people, the business, the work plan in essence, the way the work is structured, and impact. What happens after the 3 years of the project, in essence, okay, when the funding has ceased? Is there a long-term benefit to the organisation here? And do you own the work? Or is a consultant effectively more or less upfront on this? I would recommend you contact those with experience, and you're getting to meet some of us in the context of this webinar, so that you can have an idea. And of course, that you engage with the Commission help desk if you find that the questions effectively in place. So just briefly, this is the last year for Connecting Europe facility, in effect. Digital Europe will be starting from the end of this year. effectively, the call will probably open probably November, December. The level of funding is going to be far more significant than under Connecting Europe facility. And of course, going through CEF, if you're familiar with CEF, you will by default be reasonably familiar with the processes under the Digital Europe programme, which will be more industry focused. They are looking at supports for SMEs. They're looking at more or less industrial capacity development, as well as building up capabilities in terms of public bodies for regulation on cyber. So on cyber, approximately 2 billion, that may be shaved back as a result of the agreement on the next MFF, but it won't be shaved back by too much. Certainly it might be 1.8 billion rather than 2. So again, level of funding is going to be much higher than before. Reference material for the call is here. So that's the web page you need to be looking at. The recording and presentations from the EU Information Day are critical, and particularly the Commission's own presentation on cybersecurity delivered at that. If you look at that presentation in terms of what to look for in terms of the evaluation process, you'll be ticking a lot of the boxes. Of course, a list of projects, Commission Help Desk, you've an outline of the contract there, and if you are looking for formal endorsement by Ireland, you can contact me in the first case so that we can make sure that it's largely a formality. So I think with that in mind, I'm going to hand back to Owen. I think maybe Sean is next to take over. Thank you very much.
That's great, James. Thanks very much. Very practical information, I think, for anybody who's looking at applying to the CEF call. Next up, we have Sean O'Sullivan from Gas Networks Ireland to provide his experience from the point of view of a successful application from 2019. So Sean, I'll hand it over to you.
Very good. Thanks, Owen. Hi, everyone. Guys, this is probably the second time that GNI have been successful in securing cybersecurity funding. And we are going to look again in the 2020 call. So it isn't a scary process. I think when you invest a bit of time and think out the project well in advance, then the process is pretty straightforward. I'll give you my thought process on it. It's just my opinion on it. So other people will have different opinions, but the application process itself took GNI about 2 weeks to complete. So give yourself enough time and try to have it all uploaded and submitted well in advance, as James was saying, just to avoid any IT glitches or breaching deadlines and all that. Start with the process by reviewing all relevant FAQ and presentations. Again, James highlighted that. Invest time here, guys, at the start, because this will save you time in the long run. It's like the analogy of getting a flat pack from IKEA and throwing away the instructions before you even unpack the box, and halfway through you say, oh, feck it, I've after missing something. So invest time here, guys. It's well worth it. Get familiar as well with the online e-submission. It's very well laid out. It is easy to navigate, and it calls out all the relevant information that you need and all the sections that you need to complete. So they're probably the prerequisites, guys, before you start the process. The next one then would be the one that I feel very strongly about, is identifying a project that you have in the pipeline or have fully scoped out. As part of the submission, you will really need to sell this idea. You will need costing sheets, you will need Gantt charts, you'll need key milestones, what resources are required, what internal and external costs will be required. You will need to have this project really fully thought through before you submit for funding. You will also need to know how you will secure the remaining funding to deliver the activities, and again you will be asked to prove your financial capability to do so, so keep that in the back of your mind as well. When you start, lads, start with a relevant project. Like I said, don't start with the approach of let's get the money and then we'll decide what we'll do with the funding. It won't work, guys. You will trip yourself as you go along the process, and probably Brian will highlight in the next section, you just won't get through. So the process itself is pretty straightforward. You have 4 forms to fill in, and you'll need a letter from the DCCAE to support it. Form A is done automatically online, and Form B, C, and D are downloaded, and you must fill it in. So I'll just step down through the relevant forms. Form A and D are probably the more meatier ones. B and C are relatively easy. So Form A is the admin information, main characteristics of the proposal. Here you will need to sell what you are going to do, and I stress the word sell. So what are you going to do with the funding? What are you going to do with the project, and what are you going to deliver? You will need to outline what the key activities are, what are our work packages, and for delivery of this action. You will then need to take each of these activities and build out in them. You will need to highlight what are the activity descriptions, what are the deliverables, are your subcontract elements, and what are the costs. You need to indicate what efforts internally or externally. You need to call out what any other major costs for that activity, dates and times and milestones. So you need to give all this information for each activity. So again, I go back to the start and say you need to have this process thought out. You need to have this project thought out. So once you complete this, you will have a Gantt chart, and you will have a costing sheet that you will attach to the submission, and it should all tie in. It should all call out what funding you're requesting for and what funding you're going to pony up to, yourself within the company. Form B is admin information and financial and operational capacity. Here you need to provide 2 years company financial statements and show how you're going to pony up the remaining money. So I suppose the EU just want to know that you're financially strong. So if you're going to get X amount of funding from EU, you will need to make sure that you can support the remaining amount. Form C is compliance with EU policy. So again, this is very straightforward. There's 2 simple questions to answer. It's a yes or no answer from memory. So very straightforward. Form D is probably the most meatiest one. Here's where you need to sell the EU NIST story, and you should assume that whoever's reading this knows nothing about your company, doesn't know why you're an OES, doesn't know what you do, who you do it for, and you need to sell that idea. So areas that I would answer is, and very straightforward, what is the purpose of the application? What objective and activity are you looking to apply for? They're the basic ones. Then you need to go in is, how's your company relevant as an OES? You really need to sell this. Like, so I'd be answering basic questions like, are you an OES in Ireland? Are you an OES outside of Ireland and in other jurisdictions across Europe or the UK? Why is your company an OES? Again, sell that idea. Are other OESs dependent on you? Then you probably need to build up a story around, have you been successful in getting EU funding before? Have you done something like this in the past? So building up the story that, you have a proven record in delivering this in the past. And another area where you could highlight and I suppose blow your own trumpet is, are you part of a collaborative or an innovation forum with other OESs, or have you been in the past? And again, it's all about selling the idea to the EU guys that this is why we need the money. This is why we're important, etc. You will then need to answer the question: how will this funding help your company achieve the NIST objectives? So here you really need to sell the idea that you know the EU directive, you know the EU strategy, and you know, how is this project going to be relevant to EU policy. So you really do need to know these, you know, these directives and strategies. You should be able to reference them, and you need to sell the fact that you do know that you do know all about these things. Another areas that you need to call out would be how you will maintain the activities post project. So as James was saying, you know, are you gonna own the material after? Are you gonna how are you gonna maintain it? Will the knowledge be retained within the company? So again, call out all those facts. So, and then, you know, just call out exactly how the whole governance structures will work within your company. You know, is there a security governance structure? Will there be financial structure? Will there be project steering groups? You know, I suppose call out everything that you possibly can think of. If it's no different to pulling a project together, you just need to make sure that everything is thought of. Your funding is, you have your funding, you have all your risks called out. You have all you're mitigating all your risks. So that's my 2 pence worth for the project. Like I said, we have been successful. We got EU funding 5 years ago for an EU funded project called COSIAN. We've been successful this year and our last year, and we're going to go again in this year. So it's not a big ordeal, guys. Spend time with it. I think when you crack it once, you crack it forever. So that's my 2 pence worth on.
That's great, Sean. Thanks very much for that. I think some excellent advice there around identifying a relevant project. So don't just follow the money. And another one there around the importance of doing the preparatory work in the first place. So read the instructions, don't throw them away. I'm sure there's a lot of information, both from James and yourself, that you presented there that you wish you knew maybe before submitting the application last year, that you've learned through your experiences now. So I think it's great to be able to share it with everybody else on the call there as well. And if anybody does have any questions, you might just hold on to them. We're going to go to Brian Honan next. So who's a previous CEF evaluator, and Brian's going to share, I suppose, from his experience, what do evaluators like to see, and maybe what are some common examples of mistakes in proposals, and what evaluators don't like to see as well, and what are the opportunities there for Irish organisations.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. And both Sean and James have actually made my job easy. Just as an evaluator, I'll just say, just do what James and Sean said and you'll be fine. But seriously, the role of the evaluators is obviously key to the whole process, and that we have to review the proposals that come in, and we have to make sure that the proposals meet the objectives of the EU and the Commission, and that they're aligned with the various different directives, etc. The key one from a cybersecurity point of view, obviously, being the NIS directive. So I just was taking notes during James's and Sean's talks there, so I just want to reiterate some of the stuff they said before I jump into my own points. What I liked in Sean's one was sell. You do have to sell your proposal. And the reason that is that as an evaluator, I don't know who you are. You know, I'm an evaluator, I'm out of Ireland. I could be getting a proposal from Poland, or a proposal from Germany, or a proposal from another country, and I don't know who the equivalent of Gas Networks is in those countries. I don't know what the role of that body is. So describing who you are, what you do, and why you're important is key to the evaluator, so we can put context around it. And we have to understand as well is that different countries have different public sector structures and different public sector bodies and different private sector bodies, etc. as well. And again, make that context clear, because the evaluators will be bringing in their own experiences from their own countries, and they may not understand that in Ireland the NCSE is responsible for cybersecurity. And if you don't make that clear as to on what their role is, or what your role is working with them, they're not going to know that, and you have to give them as much information as you can. The evaluation happens in kind of like 2 stages. The first stage is where, as an evaluator, you're given your list of proposals, you review them at home by yourself, you give your scores, and they're submitted back in. And then all the evaluators are brought together in Brussels for a week. So we spent several days locked in an office, well looked after by the INEA and CEF and everybody there as well. But it's not the most exciting job to be doing, reading all these proposals. Sean outlined, it takes 2 weeks to put together, for them to put together a proposal. It can take quite a while to read these. So as Sean says, make sure yourself what you're doing. Make it an engaging proposal, because your proposal could be quite similar to several others that are coming through other member states. So try and add a bit of pizzazz to it, or a bit of meat to the bones, to make the evaluators sit up and take notice to this. Because if yours is the 5th proposal on how you're going to implement threat intelligence to identify actors that are threatening your environment, why is yours going to be any more different than somebody else's? And make it stick out. The evaluators come from different backgrounds. So I obviously come from a commercial background, but the evaluators I've worked in the past have come from, some of them being in industry, some of them have been semi-retired, so their industry experience may not be most up to date either. So keep that in mind, that the people evaluating your proposals don't have maybe the same experience as you. We also have evaluators coming from academia, so they'll be bringing their experience to bear as well. So it's very important that you do fill the forms in fully, that you provide clear and unambiguous description of what it is you're proposing to do and how you're going to do it. I liked Sean's talk there about having detailed project plans, because as an evaluator, that's where we can see the meat of the proposal. That proves to me as an evaluator you've thought about this, that you're not just throwing in a last-minute proposal in the hope of getting some money, that you've actually sat down, you've thought about this. Again, referring to James's talk there, where he says if you've got some projects on the back burner now or coming up, maybe use them as for your proposal, because you've got a lot of work there already. Detail your costs. As an evaluator, we have to make sure, it may sound trite or silly, but we do take our responsibility as spending EU money serious. We are spending taxpayers' money. We are giving money out. We want to make sure that it's accountable and it's applicable. So the costs you have, make sure they're detailed. Make sure they're realistic. I've seen proposals coming in looking to buy servers at €25,000 per server. And when you look at the spec of the server, you're going, where the hell are they buying that machine from? Like it costs way too much. So just make sure they're relevant. The costs are applicable and achievable as well. The other key thing we want to make sure is that the project is still sustainable after the funding from the EU is over. And sustainable is in 2 parts. One is, as both James and Sean highlighted there, is that who owns the intellectual property? Who owns the project afterwards? And if the project looks to be owned by private sector, that will actually be a negative viewpoint by the evaluators, because, again, coming back to the fact that we're allocating taxpayers' money to a project, we don't want to be seen that the EU is sponsoring or funding a private sector company to develop its own business and to, be be able to compete against its own private sector companies. It's fine having private sector companies involved in your consortium and in your project, but it has to be clear that ideally the ownership of the outcome of everything is still remains in more favor of the public side of things, and that you're able to financially maintain the project after the initial funding, that you won't be coming back in 3 years' time looking for more money from the EU to try and keep it going as well. Do make sure your proposal focuses on the benefits that the project is going to give, not just for yourself as an organization, but what is it going to do at the national level for Ireland, for the country you're in, but also the EU level. Any projects that we've evaluated that shows cross-border benefits, sharing of information across the EU, helping the EU become more resilient and more secure from a cyber point of view, actually gets extra, it raises the profile of it. As both James and Sean says, make sure you've outlined your proposal that aligns with the goals of the EU and the NIS, etc. Be very careful, as I said, about your consortiums. Make sure there's a good balance, that it's not totally private sector, that there is a good balance in there, and that you do have letters of support. Those projects that have had more letters of support from other bodies and even entities in other EU countries look more positive, or we look upon them more positive than those who might just have one letter of support from somebody, from one organisation. Something that both James and Sean touch upon as well is make sure you've got good detailed CVs of those involved in the project, and that those CVs demonstrate the capability and the capacity of the individuals involved in the project. Again, we want to make sure that whoever is going to be working on the project has the relevant experience to be able to deliver what the proposal is, and also to make sure that they can continue to deliver it as well. So I liked Sean's talk there, as I said, about a detailed project plan, because that can be very beneficial there. And that's it. Make sure about the key thing is, make sure your proposal is clear and unambiguous, with enough details that the evaluators can give you as many points as they can. We don't want to be taking points away from a proposal. We want to be giving points to it. The more information we have, the more detail we have, the easier it is for us to do that. Do remember, all the evaluators, not all of them will be native English speakers. So try and keep your language in your proposal, as I said, understandable and clear, and don't try and use too many buzzwords or three-letter acronyms, etc. Just try and keep it clear. People will be coming from different backgrounds, may not have English as their first language, so it's important to keep all that. So that's kind of where it is from an evaluator's point of view. Kind of reinforcing a lot of what James and Sean is saying is your preparation that you've put into your proposal will shine through at the evaluation stage and make it, your job is to make my job easy. And if you make my job easy, you've a higher chance of getting the funding than somebody else. So keep it clear and detailed where you can. So that's it.
That's excellent. Thanks very much, Brian. Again, very practical advice there for anyone that's considering your proposal, and the importance of selling your proposal, that evaluators don't know who you are, and to outline, okay, what are going to be the benefits of this funding to your organisation, but also to think about the wider context, the benefits at the national level, the European level as well, and also explaining what the Irish context is, making that clear. So for you, how does your organisation fit within the Irish context to other organisations and your relationship with them. So we're going to move on to question and answers just for the last 7 minutes. We have one from Maura Regan there. So asking James, I suppose, in regards to getting a proposal ready and reviewed externally prior to submission, who should we approach to do this? So James, if you've any maybe suggestions for anyone that's preparing an application, what are their next steps and what support is there for preparing applications?
Thanks, Owen. Yes, I think based on the question that Maura has mentioned there, I think in terms of external reviewers, ideally they're people who are familiar with competitive calls for proposals at EU level. They understand. Certainly they can be from academia, they can be any of us who are involved in essence. I would suggest that if you are going to approach myself, for example, or others, that you would effectively be at a relatively late stage in the process. In other words, or midterm through the process, you would have given a lot of thought. You would have got some form of approval in place, and you would be certainly halfway through preparing your proposal. There's no point coming at the very end. In terms of the end of October, I would suggest maybe mid to late September is the ideal time after you put a significant amount of effort in. You've got clearance, you know what you want to do, and you're now basically, you're asking someone to kind of say, okay, to kind of vet it in terms of, well, how would an evaluator look at this in essence, or how would the EU look at this? And as pointed out by Sean and by Brian, effectively it's about selling your proposal. It's also about ticking the boxes. In other words, have you provided the context in essence? So people don't necessarily know who you are. They don't even know the Irish environment, etc. They don't know what the benefits are to the EU of your proposal. If it's clear, you know what the benefits are to your company, your organisation, and certainly what are the benefits to Ireland, what are the benefits to you. That is, I think that is very, very, very important. But certainly, I think the key issue here is preparation. The earlier you start in the process, the more you reach out and consult informally with those who have experience, and also making time for maybe a pseudo kind of formal kind of review process. Obviously, if anyone was to approach me, you're going to do so at your own risk, etc. All I'll be able to do is give you back insights in terms of how you understand them. What you deal with those comments is up to you. I hope that answers the question. Maura.
You're on mute, Owen.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks a lot, James.
We have another question from David O'Connell. Can multiple local authorities join together to submit a joint proposal, for example, for a SIEM and SOC solution?
From my point of view, yes, David, certainly there can be consortia, so there can be multiple local authorities there. The key question you then have to ask yourself is, has any of these authorities been designated as an operator of essential service? If not, you will certainly need to have an operator of essential service, the one that's designated as part of your consortium in essence. And fundamentally, you need to also look at the objectives of the call. It's about building up internal capabilities of critical infrastructure operators who happen to be so designated, as well as looking in terms of, okay, if you're looking at a threat sharing group or an ISAC, but here you're talking about SIM and you're talking about SOC. So to me, that suggests you want to do something internally. The key issue is, are you an OES or are you, and what is your relationship to OES?
And James, just yourself and Brian both touched on it, and the opportunities for consortiums. So how might somebody go about, I suppose, finding a project partner, maybe within Ireland, but also from across the EU? What types of organisations should they be looking for and how to identify them?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'll give you the typical consultant's answer. It depends. So it depends on your own organisation and what your project is, and where you need those key skills. So one thing I would straight away suggest on is to leverage Cyber Ireland. If you're looking for a partner to go for one of these things and you don't have the core skills you need, maybe approach you to see if you're aware of any members of Cyber Ireland who could be potential partners. So that's where I would one I would suggest on that one anyway.
Yeah, that we'd be happy to, I suppose, matchmake any interested parties. We'll be sending out a survey afterwards to gather feedback around any companies or organisations that will be interested in applying to the call, and we'll also have an option there to identify if you're looking for project partners as well, so you can fill that out. And then Sean, just I suppose, you know, from your experience, have you learned anything? Is there anything that you would do differently if you were applying for it again this year? And how have you found your I suppose, your interactions with the European Commission as well?
Yes, on yeah, the interaction with the European Commission is very good. So once your proposal goes through, you are designated with a project manager as such, and you know they will step you through the whole process. They will support you through the whole process, and they are and that person is your main contact for the rest of the duration of the project. So the only negative I'd have on that is a lot of it is done over emails. Maybe things would get better if you could have a call with some of the people in the EU or the Commission and the commissioners, just to stop the tic-tacking on the emails. But yeah, by and large, that's all very positive. What would I have done differently? Like I said at the start, I would have sat down and invested a day or two reading all the FAQs, looking at the presentations, looking at the webinars that are recorded, to get you a feel of it. But also, you know, when they go through it, you kind of get inside their head really and what they're looking for, how to write up the documentation, how to sell the idea. I didn't do that at the start, I must admit on, and I did go back and redo it after first pass. It just didn't look right. I gave it to one of my colleagues, and they said if I was scoring this, I wouldn't give you funding. So you know, I went back to the start and re-looked at things. So that's probably the only thing I'd have done differently at the start.
Thanks, Sean. So we're coming up to 12 o'clock. We're just 1 minute over, so we might wrap things up. James, if you have any finishing comments or anything that you'd like to add.
Well, more or less just to thank Owen, thank Cyber Ireland for organising the webinar. In essence, we certainly would welcome as NCSC and Department of Communications more applications from Ireland for CEF funding. We think it's an opportunity to build up capabilities at 75% EU funding level. That's unlikely to remain the case in the future. And we also think it's a good opportunity as well for developing relationships in the context of Brexit. So for example, if you are looking at partners, you unfortunately will not be able to look at partners in the UK or Northern Ireland, for example. Best of luck. Thanks very much also to Brian and Sean as well.
Thanks very much, James, and thanks to our three presenters, James, Sean and Brian, for their voluntary time this morning and their expertise and advice. Special thanks to James also in putting together much of the work for this webinar. As James has said, look, there's a real opportunity here for organisations from Ireland to leverage this funding, especially for projects and organisations that may be looking to implement projects anyways. And it's a really attractive funding rate at 75%. And I think also just highlighting that there's a skill to understanding the European funding landscape and how it works. As Sean alluded to, once you understand it, you have a template there, and it makes it much easier to go on and apply for future funding. So there's benefits in looking at European funding from a longer term perspective, not just this funding call. Both Cyber Ireland and the NTSC would be delighted if Irish organisations have relevant projects and would apply to CEF, and we'd like to track who is interested in submitting a proposal. So we'll be sending out a survey after the webinar to see if organisations are applying for the call, and I'd ask you all to take a couple of minutes to fill that out, even if you're not going to apply for it, and we'll then make the recording and slide decks available to those who have completed the survey. A quick update on Cyber Ireland activities as well. For any organisations that are not members, you can find out more information around our cluster and our activities on the website. You can sign up for free to our monthly newsletter to stay up to date on all activities. For example, we recently closed our first annual cybersecurity skills survey. That's going to provide better data to understand the current cyber labour market in Ireland and to address key skills shortages for the sector. We're also putting together a coordinated campaign from industry to promote the Cybersecurity Month this October, working with the NCSC as well. So please get in touch with us if your organisation has any planned activities or would be interested in supporting this. We'd also have information and updates around new security related courses, European and national funding streams similar to CEF, and of course all Cyber Ireland events, regular meetups. The next South Chapter meeting is on Threat Intel on the 9th of September, and West Chapter is running a meeting in October, and we'll have a series of events for Cybersecurity Month in October as well. So to participate in the cluster, there's more information on the website where you're able to sign up as well. So thanks again for your time and have a great day.